afternoon. It's not Nene and Papa this time. I'm Danae, and I have a very special, wonderful friend and guest in the studio with us today who is going to share her journey of being an Enneagram. Well, you know what? I'm not going to say it right now. I'm just going to introduce Samantha Horton with us from Marietta right now, right?
Technically Powder Springs, but yeah, okay, Marietta.
Let's give credit to Powder Springs.
Yeah. More people know of Marietta, but that's fine.
I think that's because we met in the square.
We did.
In Marietta.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So, Samantha is her name, but I call her Sammie. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Heard somebody say that one time and it stuck. So, Sammie, what is your Enneagram number?
I am a dominant type 7.
Yay! I know. I talk about it all the time that I am a 7, but I don't think I have any close friends. We were talking about this earlier that are 7s. You are a rarity in my life.
Am I a unicorn?
You're my unicorn.
Okay, good.
I'm surrounded by 9s and 2s.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to have you here to talk about it.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, tell me a little bit about where you are at this point in your life, who you're married to, and the whole family dynamics.
Okay. I am married to Thomas. He is my husband of 18 years. We just celebrated 18 years together in July. We have 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, ranging from ages 6 to 17. That's a lot in and of itself.
That's a lot. And I just have to say, I'm going to put her picture up for you guys to see, but I'm telling you, you're going to look at her and go, you're married 18 years. Did you marry when you were like 8? She did not.
I did not. But yeah, yes, we did get married young. I was 21, started having kids pretty much right away. But yes, so Thomas, the love of my life, our 5 children, I currently work at a salon. I'm apprenticing to become a hairstylist. It's not anything I ever saw myself doing, but...
Well, wait a minute. As a 7, did you have like a long-term goal in mind?
I've had a lot of those.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I could do an entire episode on all of the different ventures that I thought about taking at one time or another. So.
We might need to talk about that. Because, and I'll say that, I've done a lot of adventures.
Yeah.
And actually posted something recently about wondering if that's what my life really is, just a series of starts and stops. Can you relate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've wanted to be a midwife. I've wanted to be a psychologist. I really wanted to be a doctor. At one point, I wanted to be a lawyer. I
wanted to be a stand-up comic.
Oh, yeah.
But
I mean,
my kids told me I wasn't funny.
Oh, no.
I think that was self-preservation on their part.
Yeah, exactly.
Mom, no, please don't.
Yeah.
So how long have you known about the Enneagram?
I think it's been probably about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. I was introduced to it pretty casually just through some friends. And I've always kind of been really into like different types of personality tests, like the DISC profile or Myers-Briggs, all of those kind of tools that help give you a little insight into who you are and what makes you tick. I'm just fascinated by that. So when I heard about the Enneagram, I was like, oh yeah. I'm all over this. And
absolutely,
I just
me too.
Dove into the deep end, and I've just kind of had I hope a healthy obsession with it ever since.
Did you feel like you identified pretty quickly? Did you know your number?
100%. And I took a lot of different whatever quizzes, tests, whatever you want to call it. And there was never any doubt on any of them. Every time it came back 7. And
I wonder, is that pretty common with 7s? That it doesn't, I know certain numbers, it takes a while to really filter through the different, and then the instincts come in and those add another layer. But yes, it was like, yep.
Yeah.
Case closed.
Yep. And, people say, keep an open mind, like be very honest. Don't try to answer the question in the way you think it would, paint you in the best light. I'm like, I didn't have to think about it at all.
No. In fact, it was like, I do that.
So,
Even though we try to put a positive spin on it, some of the things were like, yeah, okay. But we know the wonderful attributes of being a 7. We live them, but you and I have had several kind of deep discussions about just life in general and how our optimism, our ability to reframe a situation has benefited us, but we both have talked about the ways maybe not wanting to deal with the painful side has also maybe delayed some growth in certain areas, or finding out later that, okay, this is what I did to avoid dealing with the situation, maybe was not the healthiest.
Yeah.
And so, that being said, we're going to take a little dive into a part of Samantha's life that is going to be a little bit challenging for some of you to hear. It's a very real, honest look at a part of growing up with a father that was not what you might call the typical father of a 7 that you would imagine, oh, well, you must have lived with, cupcakes and unicorns all your life. So if I can ask you to just take the mic and start telling me, or telling the audience, because I've talked to you about this before, how your life was as a child.
Yeah. So again, I feel like this could probably fill 10 different episodes. So I'll give like a 30,000 foot overview.
Don't rush.
Okay.
Because we can make this a part 1 and part 2 real easily.
So early childhood, my parents were very young when they got together and had me. My mom was 16 when she got pregnant and ended up marrying my dad by the time she was 17. My dad came from a really very dysfunctional family. They were from a small town in Ohio, and his family was kind of known as being that family in the town, just very, very dysfunctional. That being said, they had me very young. So for the first few years, like probably 5 years, and I have a few memories of this time as a young child, but my dad had a pretty heavy drug addiction, and that went on till I was about 10 years old. It got really, really bad. He, would take things from our home, sell them, was stealing constantly. He had a very heavy crack addiction. So early on, that's like most of my memories. Like I have memories of, drugs and paraphernalia being on the table in the morning, like trying to have cereal, getting ready for school, and my mom and dad fighting, or my dad, was gone for 3 or 4 days at a time on a bender, and seeing the emotional toll that took on my mom. So there was that. And then when I was about 6 or 7, one day, my mom wasn't home, and I have a younger brother, and he was on the floor watching TV. I was sitting in a chair. My dad was laying on the couch and invited me to come over and sit with him. And like I said, my dad wasn't present a lot. He was in and out, and I didn't really know who he was, but he had been home for a good amount of time and was kind of showing interest. So that, as a young girl, that made me feel really good and excited. And
about how old did you think you were at this time?
7, 6 or 7. Yeah. And then he just started, so I was sitting with him on the couch, and then we laid down, and he just started touching me in a way that was very unfamiliar. And I was kind of alarmed and pretty uncomfortable. Although, again, as a young girl, I didn't really know what was happening. And I remember asking him, like, why are you doing that? And he just said, oh, because it feels good. And he was very lighthearted about it. And it was just like, almost like it was just no big deal. Like, this is just, and again, I didn't really have many positive memories with my dad. And I remembered more of him coming home drunk or high and being angry and fighting with my mom, and me trying to take care of my younger brother and sing him to sleep so that he wouldn't be afraid. And so to have my dad be, happy and paying attention and not angry. And I just thought, oh, okay. and that was it. And I just kind of rolled with it. And then, so again, 6, 7 years old, that continued and got more intense for the next 8 years. That's my first memory of the abuse, and then it just continued on from there. My dad eventually went to rehab and was able to kick the drug habit. After that, after he came out of rehab, my mom had always taken us to a church that my grandparents attended, a Methodist church, pretty casually, but we were involved. And when my dad got out of rehab, he started attending that church and, quote unquote, got saved, and we were there for a couple of months, and then he decided we were going to move down to the Baptist church down the road. It was very large. They just built a new building. It was kind of like the talk of the town. Everybody knew that church was doing big things. And so we started attending there. It was very legalistic. And so immediately everything changed.
Because your dad had gotten saved.
Correct. And so we went from like casually going to church and being involved to like we were going every time the doors were open, and I could no longer wear pants. I had to wear long skirts, and it was just this complete overhaul. But my mom was happy because my dad was finally off drugs. I think I was probably 10 or 11 at this point. So the first 10 years of my growing up, he was highly addicted to drugs. So it was very volatile in our home. And the sexual abuse had started as well. So he went to rehab, he came out, he found Jesus, like, okay, this is a new day. We're starting over, new church. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I mean, I like wearing Levi's, but I guess you're not allowed to do that.
I can trade the abuse for a long skirt.
Yeah.
And when I say, I just want to interject this. When I said, oh, and your dad got saved. Yeah. It's like with air quotes. Because...
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what it said, called on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
And essentially it's, you say this prayer and then stuff happens. Like you made the deal and you went all in.
You made the deal.
And the magic's going to happen. And that's really how it was. I mean, that's what it was like for us and our family. And we got heavily involved in the church right away. And we were accepted in pretty early on. And my dad he enrolled, so the church at the time had an extension campus of a seminary. And so he enrolled in seminary. He became what they called them preacher boys. And so he was like the lead pastor. He was like one of his boys. And, and having kind of that again, I'm using language from this culture, like testimony, like
right.
His testimony was that he was addicted to drugs. It was very dire, and he found the Lord. And like I said, the magic happened, and he was able to kick all of that without any type of therapy or anything. So, yeah.
Was the abuse still happening, or had it stopped for a while?
Well, it stopped when he went to rehab, and when he came back, there are some fuzzy spaces in my timeline. Sure. And I think that's just it was my brain's way of protecting me. And so I don't push that to recover every single memory. So there are some like gaps. I think there was a little bit of time where the abuse had stopped, like when he came back home from rehab, that there was a period, a small window where he wasn't abusing me.
But I mean, once you got to the new church and the magic took over.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. Every single night. Yeah.
Still?
Yeah.
And even while he was in seminary?
Correct.
Okie dokie.
Yeah. So it was very dualistic. So our outward life was, mom, dad, daughter, son, dress the part, talk the part, look the part. I mean, all of that. And then at home, it was just utter chaos. There was just this really dark secret that I was always carrying around, and it went on daily for years.
And so in the whole time that he's going to seminary, this is going on at home, and do you think that he knew he was going to step into a life in a lead position in the church that was going to require him to face this demon or whatever they want to call it at some point, and maybe until he was officially in that role, he could keep keep this up. So what happened, I guess what I'm asking is, did he graduate and he became the lead pastor, right?
Yeah. So he did graduate seminary, took a church of his own. We were living the pastor's family life. It was as hypocritical as it could be.
Which often, I'll leave that out. Okay.
But yeah, by day, everything was fine. And I've never been an addict. I had a therapist tell me once that I have an addictive personality and I have like an 85% chance of becoming an addict. And I don't know if it's my 8 wing, but I remember being a teenager and thinking that will never be me. And I just kind of determined that day that if you tell me I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do it. So
that's where that works in our favor. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell us we can't.
Yeah.
Don't tell us we can. And
I was determined to kind of steer the ship of my own life and not have somebody tell me what I was going to be or do.
You know what I find interesting is that, and kind of side note over here, I have heard through the years of studying the Enneagram that the number that's most prone to addiction is a 7.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, when I was a teenager and I was in school, they showed us that video or I'm sure there were several videos, but the one I remembered was, if you do drugs, this is what your babies will look like. And they showed horrible pictures of, very heartbreaking deformities. Yeah. And so at that moment, I was like, nope.
Yeah.
And I never. And so I know it's the same thing. We can become addicted to other things.
Right.
The addictive personality, but drugs was not one of them. Yeah. And so I can imagine that it was a double thing for you, having the determination not to and being a witness to what it could do every day.
Yeah, I was very determined that would not be my path. Sorry. I was trying to think of what we were saying before.
We're good. We had gotten to where he's taking a lead. He had his own church, as they say.
Right. Yes. So he's living his life and pastoring, and my mom is pastor's wife, and I have my younger brother and we go to Christian school. Looking back now with the language that I have around it and just the understanding of the Enneagram, it's so clear to me how I operated. 7 is my default. It's my autopilot. It's what is natural to me. It's my brain. And I think it helped me survive. I think I was in survival mode most of my childhood and adolescence. And I'm grateful for that. I don't know what my life would look like now as an adult if that wasn't my default. I'm not saying that other types or numbers wouldn't handle it well, or that they wouldn't be able to.
Right. But it is a unique perspective. And again, it comes with being able to look back. You can look back on you can't know it while you're in it, especially saying, oh, this is my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Or I'll go, I'll take my mind to a place and I literally, would do that. And I didn't have a horrible childhood, but I had, as all children do, we have moments that we have to figure out, how do we deal with this? How do we survive in this moment? And mine was just a mental escape.
Yeah.
I would go to the ducks on a pond and I still will make references to, and I'm much older, I won't say it again, to the ducks on the pond. And I don't know why that was a thing.
Yeah.
But I knew I had this ability to just disassociate from what was going on and have this mental image that there was sunshine on the other side. And do you feel like that's how you coped?
Absolutely. So everything took place at night when the rest of the house was asleep and it was dark. So I would disassociate completely, and mentally I would go to a different place and I would just tell myself, like, the sun is going to rise. The sun is going to rise.
Wow.
The morning will come and I just have to make it to the morning. If I could just get to morning. And then as I got older, it was, I just get to 18. Just get to 18.
Yes. And again, okay, as 7 to 7, we are very future oriented.
Correct.
And that is a gift in so many ways. And I know that it can also be, this is part of where choosing not to deal with what's going on right in front of us. I've said before that I have actually said, I'm going to get over this. You know, we're not going to be angry about whatever it is we're talking about right now. So let's just go, let's fast forward, because we know we're going to be there one day.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
I've felt that many times.
I know it absolutely had to be such a gift at that moment.
It was, yeah.
To be able to see the future, where we know other numbers sometimes totally revert back to the past. So if it was bad yesterday or today, you know, it was bad yesterday, it's going to continue being bad. And I'll just keep reliving the past. So grateful that you could see that the sun would rise tomorrow. So can we go forward with the rest of the story?
Absolutely. So at one point I tried to reach out and tell my mom, without going into detail, it didn't really go over well and nothing really ever happened. And so I kind of just resolved myself to the fact that this is just the way that it is. And I can continue to push back or fight against that to no avail, or I can just, again, bide my time. 18 will come and then I'll leave. And that's what I did for a couple more years. And then I was about 14. I couldn't do it anymore. I was living a double life, not by my own choice. School was my escape, and I went full force into just that being the life of the party, cheerleading, student council. I was involved in everything I could so that I could stay after school for more things, or go to all of the ball games, you know, anything to just not have to go home. And so I got to the point where I couldn't live the double life anymore. And I didn't know what to do. So I reached out to a trusted teacher at school, and just kind of told her what had been going on. And I know she had to inform higher ups. Yeah. And she told me she was going to have to tell someone, and I was okay with that because I was desperate. I couldn't do it anymore.
At 14.
Yeah. And so I found myself later that day in a boardroom with the head pastor of the church, the principal, the dean of students, and like a guidance counselor, 4 older white males. And I was sitting across the table from them as they asked me questions about what I had told her. And it was very uncomfortable. And I was immediately regretting saying anything.
That is just abuse in and of itself.
Yeah. And I didn't know that at the time, but I felt so vulnerable. And I didn't feel safe. I was really afraid of what they were going to do with the information, even though I knew I needed to tell somebody. It was a very strange headspace to be in. And the lead pastor said, it was on a Wednesday, we had Wednesday night church. So he said, tonight after the service, I'm going to come to your house and speak to your parents. Don't say anything to them. And I didn't. I went about the rest of my school day as if nothing had ever happened. Went to church that night, did our youth activities, was very, very anxious. When I got home, I went straight to my room and locked the door and went to sleep. And then at about 11:30 at night, my mom was knocking on my door. She told me to come out to the living room. She had been crying, and she sat down on the floor along with my dad and the lead pastor. And we had about a 5 to 10 minute conversation that consisted of the pastor telling me that my dad is sorry. And he said, you know, your dad has something he wants to say. My dad looked at me and apologized, and there were tears. And from there, the pastor let me know that the ball was essentially in my court now, and that it was my job to forgive and put this to rest, because if I didn't forgive, then a root of bitterness would spring up in my heart.
Oh my gosh.
Which would continue to develop and create like this chasm between me and God. And it would put me at enmity with God if I had bitterness in my heart. And so my job was to look at him and forgive him and
forgive and forget.
Absolutely. And he left. We all went to bed. And the next day we had breakfast at the breakfast table and went off to school and work. And that was the end. I've
heard most of this before, and I'm speechless. I'm grateful for laws that are in place today and the way our consciousness has evolved. I would hope, I do believe, I want to believe that if that had happened today, I could be wrong, I'm not in that environment, that the people who were supposed to come to your defense would come to your defense and not lay more abuse on you and the guilt and the shame and say basically, now it's up to you to forgive. You've been forgiven.
Exactly.
Now you have to do the same, or you're the guilty one.
Yeah.
You're the guilty one now.
Yeah. You can't withhold forgiveness because look at everything you've been forgiven for.
That's...
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm telling you, even hearing it again, I get chill bumps. I look at the woman that you are today and the strength that you have to be as bold with this story and realize it's not a shameful story. It's not your shame. The shame is on, and shame is a strong word anyways. I know there are reasons that people do what they do. I do believe, as hard as this is to say, that people do the best that they can at the time. I know that you've had a lot of time to process your father's life. And I think you have forgiven him. Yeah. But forgiveness does not mean, and so we'll just go on business as usual.
Correct.
Because nothing can go on as usual.
Right.
Coming out, the exposure into the light, just within your family, had to change. Yeah. Maybe you had breakfast the next morning, but everybody changed that night. Yeah. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And so here's where it kind of played into maybe an unhealthy side of a 7 who, would like to avoid pain, especially emotional pain.
Oh, yes. We'd much rather have physical pain. Just,
I've done natural childbirth and and opted for that. And I feel like my physical pain tolerance is very high, but when it comes to emotional pain, I can be very immature in that area.
See, that's where, I understand it looks like we're immature, but it's a self-defense. It is. It's our mechanism of saying, I can't go that deep. And I hope we can have another episode because we're going to have to wrap this one up in a minute and I want to bring Thomas in because he's a 4 and I've had Kelly Smith on before, who is also a 4, and I've come to realize that that's the missing part in me, and that the fear of going into the pain emotionally is what I need to lean into, and so we'll talk about Thomas. Okay, and bring him on. So, is this a good place to take a pause? Yes. Is it? Absolutely. Okay, then we're going to wrap it up for this episode, but since I've got her here, I'm going to use her all I can because she lives like an hour and a half away. So thank you, and we will be back next week with part 2 of our interview with Sammie Horton.